December 1914. The Endurance crossed into the Weddell Sea and sailed south towards Antarctica. Can you imagine being on the open ocean 500 miles from the nearest town on a tiny boat? Shackleton and his crew were that far removed as they sailed into the Weddell Sea on December 5th, 1914. They were full of excitement and eager for adventure. Sir Ernest Shackleton sailed the Endurance towards Antarctica on his 1914 expedition. No place on Earth is more hostile to life than Antarctica. Plunged into darkness for months, temperatures fall well below negative 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and the winds can whip up to 200 miles per hour. December 1914. As the Endurance continued to sail south towards Antarctica, they began to experience heavy pack ice. The crew of the Endurance would often spot humpback whales blowing, tail slapping, and breaching amongst the pack ice. To reach Antarctica, the Endurance had to cross the Weddell Sea, where they encountered pack ice stretching out for 700 miles before them like a giant jigsaw puzzle. Pack ice occurs when the ocean freezes and forms chunks of ice. This ice is constantly changing as it's pushed along by winds or currents. Open water, called leads, can be found between the large ice chunks. The Endurance would follow these leads to continue to move towards Antarctica. Sometimes many pieces of the pack ice smash together to form a large mass called an ice floe. January 18th, 1915. The Endurance became trapped as the pack ice blew in around them. The Endurance becomes trapped in an ice floe before ever reaching Antarctica. The officers and crew of the Endurance never gave up trying to escape the ice and reach the open water. Sometimes they tried to dig their way out. Other times they used boiling water to try to melt their way out of the frozen ice. The crew of the Endurance explored the ice, hunting for food and looking for a way to escape. It wasn't easy crossing the rough and ever-changing, buckling and bulging ice. January 1915 to April 1916. For 16 long months, the Endurance and its crew were trapped in a large, moving ice floe. Shackleton and his crew drift, trapped in the ice floe, for 16 months. Worried that the ever-changing and shifting ice would compress and crush the ship, Shackleton ordered his crew to abandon the ship and move their camp to the ice. Pressure from the ice makes the Endurance literally jump into the air and settle on its beam, according to steward Pierce Blackborough. Millions of tons of moving pack ice continued to press against the Endurance with tremendous pressure, finally crushing the ship. December 23rd, 1914. Shackleton and his men abandoned their ocean camp in search of safer ice. April 1916. Finally, after 16 months on the ice, the weary and frostbitten men spotted land. The sight of this land was electrifying. As the ice floe shifted north, the weather warmed and the ice began to break up. Shackleton and his men escaped in their 3 lifeboats, the James Caird, the Dudley Docker, and the Stancomb Wills. The crew rowed their 3 lifeboats for 100 miles to the uninhabited Elephant Island. The men set up a makeshift camp under their lifeboats. It was a tight fit, but they were warm and safe. The hut grows more grimy every day. Everything is sooty black. We arrived at the limit where further increments from the smoking stove, blubber lamps, and cooking gear are unnoticed. The inside measurements were 18 feet by 9 feet by 5 feet at the highest. 22 men lived in this hut for 4 months. Shackleton knew his crew had to reach civilization if they were to have any chance of rescue. The nearest was 800 miles away at the South Georgia whaling station. Shackleton decided that he and 5 other crew members would make the long, dangerous journey while the others waited on Elephant Island. April to May 1916. Shackleton and 5 others set out to reach the South Georgia whaling station. There, they hoped to secure a rescue. The perilous 800-mile journey would be made through the world's worst seas. During the long trip, the men switched off shifts so that 3 men slept below while the other 3 sailed, navigated, and baled water. After 17 days at sea, the crew landed on the remote island of South Georgia. Shackleton took 2 men with him as they crossed the island to seek help at the whaling station. On their trek, these men encountered unknown mountains covered in loose rocks and ice, fields of thick snow, gullies, deep crevasses, and jigsaw-like glaciers. September 1916. Rescued. Shackleton secured a ship and returned to pick up his men. At the Stormness whaling station on South Georgia Island, Shackleton is able to borrow a steam-powered tugboat, the Yelkel, from the Chilean government. Soon, he and his crew set off to save their friends. It had been arranged that a gun should be fired from the released ship when she got near the island. We saw the yokel before we heard any gun. It was an occasion one will not easily forget, said by Second-in-Command Frank Wild. Against all odds, Shackleton ended his expedition without losing a single member of the Endurance's crew.